Hello and welcome everyone to our next episode of Help and Trade podcast, where we give space to entrepreneurs and their startups. My today's guest is Karin Mohler, about to be actually entrepreneur, to be precise, in freelance writing. And I hope I got it right. Karin, please introduce yourself and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. Hi, it's great to be here. And my name, as you already mentioned, is Karin Mohler. I've been living here in Basel for about 20 years. I've been a stay-at-home mum for quite a long time. And I found that after the kids got a certain age and were out at school a lot, I had a lot more time and decided to experiment on a creative level to see where that would take me.
And that journey took you to freelance writing?
That journey took me to writing initially, to a course in creative writing, an online course. I'm very much into online courses. I've pretty much done them all, I would think. Yeah, the writing led me to writing a novel. And that in turn, once I realized, would take a lot longer than... to make money or of any sort, that then took me to, or brought me to the idea of starting to offer my writing services in different forms.
So writing is actually not a new skill for you, right?
Not really, no. I've always loved to write, and I speak many languages, and so I enjoy languages and the sounds of languages and words, and so I've always loved writing, yeah. Okay,
and professionally you also have experience in, for example, translation, if I remember right.
Well, yes, that's one of the freelance writing jobs that I fell into. I think a friend of mine was writing a script for a play, and so she asked if I would translate it from German into English. And I never actually wanted to get into translating because I prefer using my own words, but I enjoyed the creative aspect. So I call it kind of creative translating. I like doing screenplays or anything to do, or books, or or short texts, short stories, things like that. Also, I worked for a newspaper here and there, a local newspaper that I translated for. Yeah, it's a way to make money and it's fun as well.
Regarding the creative part, what did you try before you started with writing? Because I imagine that you had a whole plethora of offers or options, what to pick up, what was always your dream to start. So what did you get yourself through? And what brought you then at the end to actually writing?
I'm not sure I understand your question as, you mean as a course or as a...
as generally as your interest that you had before.
Just interest before I started the creative writing?
Yes.
Well, of course, I love to read and I love people, and I also used to sing and telling stories, also to my children, I guess, reading them goodnight stories. All that brought me to this idea that I could do something also from home. It was very important for me at the time to be able to do something from home and to do a course from home. I suppose I just then Googled around a little bit. What are my options? And I found the Open University, and they offer courses in creative writing, and that's how I kind of fell into that just made total sense to me then, when I saw what they offered and what they trained you to do, writing poetry, short stories, and language, and that just hit a spark, I suppose, in me. Yes.
It sounds certainly like a long path from just a hobby or something you like to do, transitioning it actually to writing a novel. That's a whole different level of writing or creative writing, at least in my understanding. Yeah. My question on that spot is, of course, how did you transition? And how did you develop from simple hobby to actually writing a novel?
Yeah, that was just the course that took me through 2 years of writing, as I mentioned, poetry and short stories. And then when I finished, I realized I'm not really much of a short story writer. I love writing poetry, but I never thought I could, it's more of a hobby, and I can't see myself making money as a poet. So I realized that all the short stories that I'd written throughout had something in them that seemed to kind of form a story. And suddenly the story formed in my mind, and I decided I wanted to give it a go and I wanted to write a novel. And of course, the experience was altogether different than anything that I expected. It took me 3 years to write it. I do have a finished manuscript, but recently I had my sister, in fact, read it. So now I have to edit the whole thing, and so it's still, the process is not finished yet. I have a mentor, and she mentioned that it takes 7 years to write a good novel. So I still have a few years to get there.
Sure. Of course, the main question is if someone wants to start writing itself, not necessarily with a big goal as writing a book, but something smaller, as a blog, for example, or any other sort of creative writing. What would be your advice how to start? Or what is your experience with that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because I actually, while writing the novel, I decided to start a blog, because of course, you need a lot of self-discipline. You need time, and you need motivation, and you need self-discipline. So you need a kind of a plan. So that's what I've learned over the years. You do need a plan. Otherwise, you just kind of flake off in lots of different projects, which I'm still doing. I'm still learning. I'm in the process. But through the blog, if you commit yourself to writing once a week or once every day or however often it is, you get into the regular writing. And of course, for writing, that's the most important, that you do regular writing, that you write daily, ideally. And of course, it's the famous, 5 minutes a day is better than nothing at all. Even 10 words a day, you'll have 100 words in 10 days, if my maths is correct, or, and it goes on like that. So it's whatever you write, however little you write. And then I decided to start a Facebook group, because on my Instagram, my Instagram account with my followers, I realized that a lot of people were interested in writing novels, or writing, whether it's a novel or a short story, just writing or poetry, that they all mentioned that they didn't have the time. And so I thought, if I have the time and I find the time, anybody can find the time, because I'm quite chaotic normally. So I started a Facebook group inviting, it was mainly women, but of course, men would be invited also to, I guess mainly for mothers, really. That's why most of them are women, to help form a kind of plan within a group. What I found is that the group motivation is a huge motivator, and we meet once a week, or we did meet for once a week. We'll be starting this again in spring, to do virtual write-ins. So we meet once a week at a certain time, and then everyone logs in, and we all write together, and I give some ideas as to what we can write. So that helps everybody to at least write once a week. And then I give ideas throughout the week as to, how to plan your day, so that everybody can find 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, which usually then turns into half an hour or even an hour, because once you start writing, you're into it. And then, rather than spending time watching Netflix or, cooking a 5-course meal, then you cook a 1-course meal instead, so that's how it kind of developed. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I think, yeah.
Absolutely,
okay,
yes.
Good.
Definitely. I'm just considering, if I was a listener and I'm, for example, a mom home, this would be a great advice, because just it shows me that what I need is a plan to begin with. But once I have the plan, all I'm lacking is the motivation and the first start.
Exactly.
But if those three are there, then there's also Karin, who can support me with her insights, inputs in her Facebook group.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to make sure to share your Facebook group.
Okay. Yeah.
It really is encouraging for people to start writing, because I know also some people that would love to start writing. It is something as a dream for someone to write a book, but just nobody knows how to do that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just work that you write a letter. It's not the case. There has to be actually a plan.
Yeah.
So can you bring us through the process of how do you actually write a book?
That's, well, it takes a lot of patience, I suppose. And like I said, self-discipline. You really do need to write daily. As to I imagine you're not asking about the methodology. That would be too much to kind of...
Any advice is good advice.
Yeah, no, I suppose it is the daily writing. If you have your idea... You have your idea that you want to write a novel, or you want to write a story about something. Maybe you have an idea of what you want to write about, but you don't know exactly where it's going to go. And then this is what I like to do in the weekly write-ins, is to just think of we start off with 10 minutes or 20 minutes of free writing, which means you just start writing anything. And even if it's repeating, there's a glass of water on the table. I don't know what to write. And then you just start writing. And then suddenly things develop. And if you're writing for 20 minutes, it's quite a long time. You can also do it for half an hour. And then suddenly ideas pop out and develop. And that's a really good way to warm up, to get your writing kind of, mode on. Yeah. And then I guess you just have to, I mean, there are so many different approaches to writing. Each writer does it in a different way. And I think for me, the most important thing was to go to workshops. So I visited a lot of workshops where you train these kind of things, where you train different approaches and you learn different approaches. You try out different ways of how to get an actual novel started, because people do it in so many different ways.
Yes, I heard that Stephen King, for example, he writes 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And he delivers each day, I think, 15 pages or something.
Right.
And so it happens that he can spit out a couple of books a year.
Yeah. Well, he knows what he's doing.
Also, he starts with very small ideas, if I remember well. And he just, for example, lies in a hospital for whatever reason, and then he sees a couple of things, and he just combines a story around it. Very simple idea.
Yeah.
And then he just elangulates it over the entire length of a book.
Yeah.
Based on a very simple idea, like, I don't know, killing nurse.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And that of course is one approach, obviously a very successful one in his case. But yeah, I mean, you do need a simple idea. You need what's called an arc of the story. You need, or what is the story going to be about, or what's the goal of it, like, whatever, what you just mentioned. And then of course there's the daily writing, which you need to practice to fill out the story, to see, how do we get to that point. And I mean, there, for example, Hemingway, I think he said that he finished each day writing. He didn't actually finish a whole chapter or a whole kind of scene. He would stop, I think, in the middle or towards the end, so that the next day you could continue from there, and, you'd be in mid-air, so to speak. I hope I've got this right. That's how I remember it. And I find that very helpful, to not completely finish a chapter or a scene, to finish, just before the end. And then you can think about it again overnight. And then the next day it helps, spark ideas and create ideas.
I was listening to the podcast with my favorite author, Chuck Palahniuk. I'm not sure if you know, the author of Fight Club.
Ah, right. Okay.
And he was telling his processing, how he writes his books, where he says at the end of the day, his writing is just summary of what he heard, stories from other people.
Right.
So he goes to social and public places, listens to people's stories. When he goes to parties, he just listens to people. And then when it's time to finish the book, he just brings it down in a laptop wherever he is. He doesn't really set up his mind on, I have to write. He just, out of his memory, he brings those on a paper, puts them down all as one single story.
Yeah.
And that's how his creative stories are being put on a paper. How did you find your best way to do? Did you also go through a lot of trials and errors, or did you just try one thing and that worked right away?
Well, I mean, I've only, attempted one novel that hasn't even been published yet, so who am I to speak? But so my experience is that example that you've just brought is one of the exercises that we were taught to do, just to listen to people on buses, and to listen to people's conversations in cafes. Not so much for stories necessarily, although of course, but also for language. So if you're doing a specific kind of, if you're writing, I don't know, a teenage novel, you hang around teenagers, and although that just seems a bit odd, I always find it a little difficult sitting in cafes and kind of eavesdropping on teenagers while they talk. So I never really got into that. But no, my approach has just been mainly with the free writing, just imagining scenes, imagining the character, the next step, imagining the room, just imagining a starting position, and, maybe starting off describing the room, because of course the room says a lot about the character, depending on what there is in the room, if it's a stark room, if it's full of things, if it's full of paintings, whatever. And then just following the character. I didn't have an idea of what the story would be about. I just knew that the character in the story was, like I said, in each of my short stories, the character was there in different forms, and then it was a matter of bringing them all together with this free writing that I did, and the character kind of led me through. As yet, according to my sister, it's a bit complicated, so I have to kind of simplify it a little bit. But I hope in the end it will make sense.
Did you know the end of your novel when you started?
No, I didn't actually. I had an idea and then it changed completely. So from what I'm told, this happens sometimes. I think some authors write like this, but then even authors that sometimes write like that sometimes have a set idea to begin with. So I think it changes. It's not just author specific, but it depends on your situation, I suppose, and what type of story that you're writing.
Do you consider already starting a new project?
I actually already have started writing, just this new year, in fact. I started writing on a second one because I think the first one is usually a bit of a trial and an error. Well, I guess they all are, but
Is it a continuation?
No, it's not actually.
Self-standing.
It's completely... I had originally thought of writing a sequel, and maybe a sequel will develop. There were some ideas when I finished that, but I just feel I have to first really perfect this first one and get it to a stage where it can be published.
Of course.
Yeah.
I have two questions. First one is unrelated to business, but that is because I heard, for example, that J.K. Rowling had a huge list with all the characters which ever were in her books. And she had also side notes to each individual character. What was his storyline? How is it going to end? What was his characteristics, description, etc. Did you also keep something like that for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As they came, as the characters popped up, I think it could be a little bit more extensive, and I've got it on lots of different documents, Word documents. So I wasted a lot of time that way. So this is one of the things that you then learn. And there are certain programs. One of them, I think, is Scrivener that you can use that will help you kind of bundle things and bundle chapters and all this kind of stuff. I also have, in my story, I have huskies. So I had to have all the different names of the different huskies so they wouldn't change over time, so you'd remember, or I would remember which one pops up where and what they look like. It's important.
Great, good.
Yeah.
I just confirmed myself that it is important. In a case, in the future, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
So being organized is also important. That's the bottom line.
Very important, yeah.
Now to the business side of writing a novel. How much of experience did you have before you started actually writing?
None at all. Absolutely none. I had no experience at all. I just completely threw myself in. I think it was for my 50th birthday, I decided I would give myself the present or the gift of going to a workshop in Paris and to see if I have any talent or if I can do this. And that's where the whole journey started.
How close are you actually to publishing? Do you think it's going to take those 4 years that you mentioned?
I hope it doesn't take another 4 years because I think, I planned to have it finished last year, but then, life happens and I didn't finish it. So I hope to finish it this year. And, what happens is when you finish, what you don't realize when you write a novel is that when you finish it, you need people to read it. So the so-called beta readers, then you take on board what they say and, adapt accordingly. If you agree and you edit it, and the editing process is quite an extensive process. And I guess there also you need a plan and you need, your daily, how much am I going to write? How many chapters will I finish? So that you have a goal in mind. Otherwise, it can be endless.
Do you already have a publisher?
I have. So I worked with this writer who's an editor, and she's an agent also. And so this is not the norm, but once she's decided that the book is good, then she will help me find a publisher as my agent, but only once she agrees that it's obviously it has to be up to her standard. So
I was wondering now, are there actually shortcuts these days because of technology progressing in the industry of publishing, for example?
Well, there is, of course, the option of self-publishing. So indie authors, that's a big, huge scene. And then there's always the discussion, do you want to go traditional publishing, like via, an agent, editors and agents, or whether you want to go to the self-publishing? I kind of, at this point, or up till now, I've decided to try the traditional route, mainly because I was informed that if you start publishing your own stories, it's much more difficult to get into the traditional type of publishing. And of course, the traditional type of publishing will most likely hit a wider range, of audience. If your book does well, of course, you'll get much more people reading it than you do if you self-publish. Because, of course, if you self-publish, you have to do everything, the whole marketing as well. And from what I've, read on Instagram and with my Instagram friends who have gone this route, there again, after you've finished the writing process, then the whole marketing process begins. And of course, the first time round, you will have no clue about how that works. So it's all quite difficult, I think, also. And,
really surprised how the whole thing is actually tangible. Writing a book is not such a foreign goal that me as a complete nobody could actually undergo. I mean, just from talking to you.
Yes.
And I certainly hope it is the case.
I think, I think with a lot of these things, we put it up on a pedestal and we think, oh, wow, how is this possible? Of course, I mean, I haven't had the experience of actually publishing a book yet. So hopefully, whatever, if I come back in a year's time, I will have a book. But I mean, even just for me on a personal level, just the fact that I had this manuscript, even though it's, it's nowhere near perfect, but it was there. And before I sent it to my editor, it was just there. And I had to write to her and say, this is like, just after giving birth, you have the new baby, in the house, and everyone is kind of, I'm completely in awe of this because I can't believe this is 3 years of work. And so there was my manuscript, and it was actually, there, and I'd actually written this. So that was quite an incredible experience, a very, emotional and exciting experience. But yes, as you say, it can be done. And one word leads to a sentence, leads to 10 pages, and I really believe that anyone can do that. And I like the idea of helping people. I feel if I can do that, then anyone can, because I am I have been in the past so chaotic. I've learned how to plan, and I've learned how to do the regular kind of writing to achieve that goal.
Sounds great to me. I mean, it's motivating to me.
Good.
It was one of the dreams of my life.
Hear.
I always wanted to write a book.
Yeah, it's so funny how many people say that. I've always wanted to write a book. And I think, stories are so wonderful, and people have so many wonderful stories and experiences to tell. And I mean, nowadays everybody writes a book. It's nothing particularly spectacular because, you can self-publish. But still, I think, on a personal level, I think, even if only one person reads it, I still think it's just a fantastic feeling. I
would like to go through that experience just to see for myself.
Yeah.
Can I actually write? Because I have tons of ideas, of course.
Yes.
Like everybody else.
Yes. Yeah.
Starting with fantasy, action movies, detective stories.
Right.
I don't know, maybe even something for kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it would be just interesting to see how far could I actually get.
Well, join my Facebook group.
Happily. And with that, we actually are reaching the end of our podcast, timely speaking.
Right.
So, Karin, if you wouldn't mind sharing your contact details where people can find you, would be great. And also, if you have any departing words, please share them with the audience. Okay,
thank you very much. Yes, so my Facebook page is, you can find me under Karin Ruth Mohler. That's Mohler. And, well, I suppose is that enough information for the Instagram account? Is probably not so interesting.
Whatever helps you.
Yeah. Well, the Instagram account is called Karin Wants an Apple Tree. So that's also the name of my blog. But I can lead you on to that via the Facebook. So, yeah.
Of course. Great.
And I'd welcome anyone that is interested in writing and has always wanted to write as a passion, as a hobby. I think it's a great kind of counterbalance to everyday life in whichever form, whether you're a stay-at-home mum or a 100% working mum or dad or man or woman. I think it's great to have the opportunity or to take the opportunity to write, to express creatively. I think it's very rewarding.
Well, Karin, with that, thank you very much for being such a great guest.
Thank you so much.
And also your experience sharing it with our audience. It's really worthwhile. And to our audience, thank you for listening. Please check our social medias via Facebook, Help and Trade, and also on our website, www.helpandtrade.com, where we publish our podcast recordings weekly. And with that, thank you for listening, and see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.